You're not stuck. You're in the $100,000 trap, and there's a math reason it feels brutal. If you're investing $500 a month and wondering why nothing's moving, watch this. Assuming a 7% average annual return, the first $100,000 takes about 7 years and 9 months, and then everything accelerates. Today I'll show you the exact split, about $46,500 you put in versus roughly $53,500 in growth, and why that flips the moment you cross 6 figures. Stay with me, because once you understand this tipping point, the next milestones, $650,000 and $1 million, stop looking impossible and start looking inevitable. So why does your balance still feel stuck early on? Let's talk about the $100,000 trap and why it feels like nothing's working. So why does your balance barely budge even when you're doing all the right things? That's the trap. Early on, your deposits drown out your results, so progress looks flat even though the engine is running. You're consistent, you automate, you add every month, and then you open the app and see a small change that barely exceeds your deposit. Maybe $520 or $540 total on a $500 month. That's not pure gains, that's your $500 contribution plus a few dollars of return. The mind reads that as failure. It isn't. It's the quiet phase where math hasn't had time to flex. Here's the early problem in plain terms. You're stacking contributions, but growth on a small base doesn't look like much. When your account is just getting started, the return dollars are tiny because the base is tiny. You add $500 and your account might show $520 or $540, which feels like noise. After a few months, the doubt creeps in. Should you change funds, chase higher returns, or wait for a better time? That doubt is expensive because the first years aren't about impressive gains. They're about building the base that later gains multiply. The illusion comes from scale. Compounding works from day one, but below 6 figures, your contribution is the loudest item. At $10,000, a 7% annual gain is about $700. At $25,000, it's roughly $1,750. Those are real dollars, but when you're contributing $6,000 a year, $500 a month, they still feel modest next to your own input. The eye wants leaps. Compounding gives you inches before it hands you yards. That mismatch tricks people into thinking nothing's happening. Here's the behavior risk. Many investors stop right before compounding becomes visible. They swap strategies, pause deposits, or move to cash because feedback is slow. It's like learning guitar. For a while, everything buzzes and your fingers hurt. Then, one day, a clean chord rings out and you can play a full song. The messy noise wasn't failure. It was foundation. This slow then fast pattern isn't a fluke. Wealth building follows a non-linear curve. The snowball starts small, then accelerates as the base grows, and returns compound on themselves. Early returns feel small, later returns feel decisive, but they're powered by the same process applied longer to a bigger base. So the goal isn't to fight the silent phase, it's to get through it. That means keeping deposits steady while the base grows large enough for growth itself to become the main contributor. Once the base expands, you'll notice single-digit percentages translating into meaningful dollar gains. That shift changes your motivation because the numbers start talking back. There's a clear ignition point where that flip begins. $100,000. Around there, the growth line starts to challenge your monthly deposits and then surpass them. The account moves without you pushing as hard, and your job changes from powering the engine to protecting it. If you want to see exactly how that happens, how roughly $46,500 of your money plus about $53,500 of growth gets you to 6 figures in under years, Let's break down the numbers. Here's the practical roadmap that gets you out of the trap. Escape Plan, the under 8-year roadmap to your first $100,000. The plan is simple enough to run on autopilot. $500 a month, long-term average return of 7% a year, and a finish line at $100,000 in around 7 years and 9 months. That timeline isn't a guess. It lines up with monthly compounding across 93 deposits, with contributions totaling about $46,500. You're not relying on a windfall, you're building a base that gets heavy enough for growth to carry more of the weight. You might be thinking, what if returns vary or the market dips? They will. Sensitivity tests show the timeline moves with your inputs. At $400 a month, your arrival comes later than 7 years and 9 months. At $600, you get there sooner. If average returns land closer to 6%, the calendar stretches. At 8%, it compresses. The path bends, but the mechanics hold. Consistency is the part you control, and that control matters more than a perfect forecast, because the 7% figure is an assumption, not a guarantee. Let's walk through the math. Over those 93 months, your total contributions come in near $46,500. The rest is growth, roughly $53,500, pushing you over the line to $100,000. Early on, most progress is your deposits. By the middle stretch, compounding starts to show up as meaningful dollars. Near the end, single-digit percentages move the account by thousands in a year without you changing your routine. Watch the cadence from the mid-years into the final stretch. Around an $85,000 to $95,000 balance, a 7% annual gain translates to about $5,950 to $6,650 in growth for the year. That's the point where your portfolio's returns can match or exceed your $6,000 in annual contributions. On a month-to-month view, growth begins to rival your $500 deposit when the balance is around $86,000 to $90,000. 7% annually is roughly $6,000 a year, or about $500 a month on that base. That moment changes how it feels to log in because the account starts adding as much or more than you do. Here's a quick mini case. Alex pauses contributions in year 3 after a rough patch. Jamie keeps buying every month. A year with a negative 15% return followed by a plus 20% rebound means Jamie bought more shares at lower prices during the dip. When the recovery hits, that larger share count amplifies the gains, effectively pulling forward progress. Jamie reaches $100,000 materially sooner, often months to more than a year ahead, despite identical starting plans. The difference wasn't luck, it was uninterrupted accumulation when prices were down. That isn't theory. Downturns accelerate share accumulation, and recoveries amplify results on the bigger base you quietly built. You won't time the lows perfectly, and you don't need to. The habit of steady buying does the heavy work you can't do with guesswork. There's also a psychological shift worth noting. When growth dollars start matching or exceeding deposit dollars, your motivation steadies. You see the account moving on its own, and the urge to tinker fades. With momentum secured past 6 figures, the next stage isn't abstract anymore. It's where returns start covering real-life line items, and a specific number makes that feel real. So let's talk about the first number where the math starts funding everyday life: $650,000. What number turns investing from theory into actual flexibility? It's not a million. It shows up sooner, and it looks like $650,000. At that level, an 8% year would throw off roughly $52,000 before taxes. That isn't fantasy money, that's rent or a mortgage, childcare, groceries, insurance, and a chunk left over. Once you cross six figures, compounding starts pulling harder. By the time you approach mid-six figures, small percentages translate into big, usable dollars. Now, limits. Markets don't pay a fixed salary. Some years they run, some years they stall, some years they drop. That's why expected returns and withdrawal rates are different conversations. You might see 6 to 8% long-term returns, but living off 4 to 6% is what keeps the engine from overheating. That gap is your safety valve. It gives you room for taxes, inflation, and those stretches where the market is flat or negative. Let's break the ranges into something you can work with. On $650,000, a 4% draw is $26,000 a year. At 5%, it's $32,500. At 6%, it's $39,000. Those figures are before taxes and depend on account type. If your portfolio averages 6 to 8% over time and you're only taking 4 to 6%, the principal tends to hold or even grow. Your base doesn't have to shrink to fund life. That's the difference between temporary support and durable flexibility. Context matters. The median U.S. household income is about $78,000 before taxes, and many households live on less after deductions and benefits. In lower-cost areas, $52,000 can cover a whole budget. In higher-cost cities, it might pay housing, food, and transportation, leaving wages to handle savings and extras. The point isn't lifestyle inflation, it's bargaining power. Take a simple scenario. You earn $65,000. If your investments can cover 60 to 80% of your expenses, your paycheck gets lighter. That opens options. You can switch to a role with better hours but lower pay, launch a small business without sweating the first few slow months, or negotiate from strength because you're not cornered by bills. When the portfolio covers the essentials, your job becomes optional in slow motion. How long does it take to move from $100,000 to $650,000 if you keep contributing $500 a month at a 7% average return? Roughly 13 to 15 years is a reasonable range, depending on market paths. The lift comes from the base doing more of the work each year, with your steady deposits acting like an accelerator rather than the main engine. If you increase contributions over time to $600 or $700 a month, the calendar shortens further. The jump from $100,000 to $650,000 sounds huge until compounding does more of the lifting. Once growth begins to consistently outpace your deposits, calendar time does more of the work than willpower. You're still contributing, but returns are pushing just as hard. That's why $650,000 isn't a distant dream after six figures. It's a waypoint that changes your options now and sets up the next decision. How do you handle the scale that comes next? Here's where the conversation turns from possibility to process. The $1 million shift, discipline over drama. So what actually changes at $1 million, besides the feeling? The first shift is psychological. You stop asking whether investing works and start choosing which tools to use. You can allocate a slice to angel checks, use conservative leverage on real estate with strong cash flows, and build multiple income streams without stretching. The menu expands and you no longer need to swing for fences to see real results. Set expectations. With $500 a month at a 7% average return, hitting $1 million typically lands around year 29 if you're starting from zero and staying consistent. That timeline is a feature, not a failure. It reflects compounding doing more of the work as the years stack. Now, the myth to push back on. $1 million isn't automatic safety. If you pull too hard, say 7 to 8% year after year, you can outrun returns and shrink the base, especially in a bad sequence of years. High risk after you win the game feels exciting, but one rough patch can undo a lot of patience. The goal at this level shifts from chasing to preserving, then letting scale do its quiet work. Let's talk scale. Small percentages become big dollars. A 5 to 8% year on $1 million throws off $50,000 to $80,000 before taxes. But prudent spending is about withdrawals, not headline returns. A 4 to 5% withdrawal rate on $1 million is $40,000 to $50,000 a year before taxes, which aligns with sustainable guidance and leaves room for volatility. Risk control matters more now than ever. Taxes nibble at every decision, so asset allocation, what you hold in tax-advantaged accounts versus taxable, begins to affect take-home results. Sequence of returns risk becomes the quiet villain. 2 bad years early in withdrawals bite harder than the same returns later. You counter that with a cash buffer or near-term bonds covering a year or two of spending, plus disciplined rebalancing, so you're trimming winners and refilling laggards without guessing. Here's a clean scenario. Keep returns in the 6 to 7% range while you live on 4 to 5%. That spread lets the base grow even as you draw income. Social Security helps too. Current average benefits are about $1,900 a month, which reduces what you need from the portfolio. You're not relying on perfect markets, you're stacking reliable sources so no single one has to carry the whole load. There's solid evidence that discipline beats drama over long horizons. Portfolios with thoughtful asset mixes and steady withdrawal rules tend to post higher success rates across 30-year periods than those that chase heat or pause and pray during downturns. The habit is boring. The outcomes are not. Here's the quiet advantage worth underlining. After the first million, each additional million often arrives faster if compounding stays intact. You only need a doubling from 1 million to 2 million, which historically happens every 7 to 10 years at typical equity-like returns. The dollars invested are larger, dividends buy more, and rebalancing systematically moves gains into the next opportunity. You don't need to do more. You need to interrupt yourself less. So the payoff at 7 figures is access and confidence. The edge is method. Keep your risk in bounds, keep your cash buffer stocked, and keep your allocation honest. Next, let's put that method into a simple set of rules you can run on autopilot. Let's turn the big ideas into a playbook you can actually run when life gets busy. Your operating system, rules that survive every market. What simple rules keep you moving when the market and your motivation wobble? You don't need complex models. You need a short list you can run even on a hectic Tuesday. 5 rules do the job. Automate contributions, raise deposits each year, stay diversified, keep buying through downturns, and set milestone check-ins. They work because they replace fragile willpower with repeatable actions and align with the core principles that drive results: consistency, automation, and time in the market. Real obstacles show up fast. Income swings mess with your plan. Headlines make you second-guess everything. And the urge to time the market whispers that skipping this month or waiting for clarity is smart. That urge is expensive. A system makes the right move automatic so you're not redeciding under stress. Rule 1. Automation. Pay yourself first on payday. Set your transfer or 401k deferral so the money moves before you see it. Treat it like rent. If cash flow varies, split your automation. Create a small fixed transfer on payday plus a percentage sweep when income hits your account. That way, good months fund more without you lifting a finger, and lean months still keep the streak alive. This ties directly to the research. Automation is the most reliable driver of consistent contributions. Rule 2. Annual step-ups. Increase contributions by 1 to 2% of income or a fixed dollar amount every year. Tie it to a date you won't miss: bonus season, a raise, or New Year. Small bumps compound into months shaved off the timeline to $100,000. Even an extra $25 to $50 a month moves the finish line closer because you're raising the base that compounding works on. If raises are uneven, use a rule like half the raise goes to investing, so lifestyle creep doesn't run the show. Rule 3. Diversification. Use broad index exposure for your core and add the right stability layer. If your time horizon is long, keep the majority in equities. Then pair it with bonds or cash for near-term needs. Map buckets by time: less than 3 years, cash and short bonds; 3 to 7 years, a blend; beyond 7, heavier equities. This reduces the chance you're forced to sell growth assets at a bad time and anchors your plan to time horizon, not headlines. Rule 4. Downturn discipline. Keep buying on schedule. Predefined rebalancing bands. Rebalance when an asset class drifts 5 percentage points or more from target, and consider adding an extra rebalance after large market drops. This makes you add to what's fallen and trim what's run without guessing, systematically capturing lower prices during drawdowns. Rule 5. Milestone checkpoints. Mark $25,000, then $50,000, then $75,000. Celebrate by locking in the next step up or by writing a short note about what's working. These checkpoints deliver real psychological benefits. They create visible proof that the plan is working, keep motivation steady during the slow early phase, and reduce the urge to tinker. Run these 5 and patience turns into progress with fewer decisions. Keep the rules tight, keep the cadence steady, and the early quiet phase starts to make sense as the balances grow. From here, the next step is seeing how that early quiet gives way to louder gains once the base is built. Here's the takeaway that puts the whole plan in motion. Conclusion. Early growth feels slow by design. Set an 8-year maximum to hit your first $100,000, about 7 years and 9 months if you automate and stay consistent. Automate $500 per month, schedule an annual increase, and keep buying through dips. Consistent, automated contributions unlock compounding and shorten the calendar. That's a simple step you can set up today and forget tomorrow. Treat $650,000 and $1 million as checkpoints, not fantasies. They follow when you escape the $100,000 trap. Build the base, let returns work, and keep your system running while the next thresholds move from distant goals to near-term milestones.